Thanks, sir. I'm glad to see that you had.
They got the memo on civility. Aren't
That's
you
right.
impressed? And I want to report that thus far midterm grades are good.
Excellent.
So, thank you all.
That's the final exam then?
This is the final exam. I gave them assigned reading. I sent them Federalist. In this segment, this is the prerogative of the congressional scholar, okay? This is what I've always wanted to have a conversation with candidates about. Because it's not always apparent to me that once folks get to Congress, they think about these things as much. They might, and I'm looking forward to the two of you that are already there. Tell me if I'm wrong. But in this segment, I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about how these candidates would do their job in Congress. Federalist Paper number 10, James Madison talks about the importance of a representative democracy and the benefits it holds over a pure or direct democracy. That is a democracy where we'd all just register our vote for ourselves on every single issue that comes along. One of the things that Madison says is a benefit of representative democracy is that our representatives can gather and deliberate in a way that we as a country cannot. And that in that deliberative process, they can refine and enlarge the public view. That's what I want to talk about a little bit tonight, is how they view that role of representation. So, gentlemen, I'm going to give each of you a chance to respond to this. I do not care what order you take it in. When you say you want to represent me and the people in this room in Congress, what do you mean and how are you going to carry out that responsibility? What does it mean for you to represent me? How will you do that job? Who wants it first?
I'm happy to start. One of the things I think is important as an elected official is to recognize that you're a public servant. And when I was appointed to the Senate, one of the first things I did was I went undercover as a senator. I put on some jeans, hat, disguised myself a touch, got on public buses, and drove around so I could talk to everyday people. Not take a poll, not hear from lobbyists. I wanted to hear from people. And then I worked odd jobs around the state. Worked at the Goodwill up here. And talked to people so that I could understand what the passion in their heart really is. Not what someone tells me that it is. What am I experiencing? I worked at a Moe's burrito, which was interesting. The little lady said, "You can't sleep at all, young man." I'm like, "Thank you for calling me young. I can't sleep." I learned a lot. So one of the most important things that I thought I should do is get around this state as a public servant and understand their issues. Second thing I've done is every year I go on a 46 county tour of all 46 counties in South Carolina. And I sit down with Republicans and Democrats, Libertarians and Independents, old folks, young folks, folks that have severe disabilities, folks who are doing really well. I want to have a cross-section of this state because I'm not elected to represent Republicans. I'm elected to represent South Carolinians and the country. And so I spent the vast majority of my time trying to have a listening tour. Trey and I are doing that right now on the criminal justice issue and on policing and community relations. We're on a listening tour. We've been in Columbia. Came up here in Greenville last week, heading towards Charleston, so that we can understand and appreciate what the issues, challenges, and hopes are, even within the most fragile and difficult relations. So my answer is simply to learn to listen so that you can serve them well.
We can just go around if that'll work. Well, Dr. Vincent, I appreciate you giving us that refresher on Federalist 10. It's been a while since I got to read it, so I got to get back in school mode a little bit. But aside from his discussion of a direct or representative democracy, the biggest ill that James Madison was trying to warn us about was, as he said it, public officials putting the interest of their faction before those of the public good. And his warning is very topical today because that's what so many Americans have seen happen in their Congress. They've seen hundreds of people supposedly elected to represent them put the interest of their faction, of their party, before the interests of the people. Whether we're talking about 6 years of complete inaction or a failure in the Senate to do their constitutional duty and at least have a hearing for a justice that the president nominated, we've seen an unprecedented level of inaction. And it's not just. And that's exactly it, because when I was thinking about this, I thought, you can't just put the blame on the factions, on the parties, right? Because these parties are made up of individuals. And it takes individuals to exercise their courage and their prerogative as a leader, as an elected official, to sometimes say no. To say, I'll vote to have a hearing for Justice Garland, even though my party doesn't want it. Or, I'm okay with passing comprehensive immigration reform, even if my party doesn't want it, because it's the right thing to do, and it's in the interest of the people, of the public good. That's what we can change, but we need new leaders to do it.
I'm going to come back to you. Okay, let me get their response, and then I'm going to come back to you.
I was just intrigued, that's all.
Oh, well, I told them to kind of nod if they wanted to jump in.
I'm happy to jump in if you want me to.
I'm going to come back to
Sure.
you and let you jump in.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, Professor, one person's faction is another person's majority. I mean that's what I keep coming back to. You referred to factions. In a couple of weeks, there's going to be a vote, and either you'll win or I'll win. It'll be north of 50%. So necessarily, every vote you cast is going to disappoint about half the people that you purport to represent. So when I hear the word faction, that's usually a phrase people use when they're in the minority, when they don't like what's going on. But if you're the representative and you are consistently voting in a way antithetical to what a majority of the people of your district want, you're not going to be a representative very long. So you ask, what does it mean to represent? I'll tell my friends here, voting is a very small percentage of what members of Congress do. I get that it's what the media always judges us on, is how many pieces of legislation have you passed? You must be historically ineffective. You haven't passed that many pieces of legislation. We have a task force now on over-criminalization, where we are going back and finding laws that were passed in the past that should not have been passed. So that is an ineffective barometer of success. My job is to listen to people I work for, many of whom disagree with me. Even in my own party, they disagree with me. Most of what our staffs do and a lot of what we do has nothing to do with politics. If you are someone trying to interface with your government on Social Security or Veterans Administration, or you have a passport issue, no one in my office will ever ask you what your political ideation is. No one in my office or Tim's office has anything to do with politics. They are there to represent the constituency no matter what your politics are. So the way I view representative, yes, you better vote the way your district wants you to vote. And if you firmly believe that your district may not have all the information that they're entitled to, then your job as a representative is to come back and say, this, you may want to consider this. You may want to consider that. But Chris, I got to tell you, my decision not to vote for comprehensive immigration reform was not a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. I mean, we'll find out in 2 weeks, but I don't think it was a mistake to say that we need to go incrementally. We'll find out. That's the beauty of our republic, is we have to face the voters every 2 years, and if our positions are not consistent with theirs, then they can send us home.
Okay, Pastor Dixon.
It's a whole lot. A whole lot. I found it really funny how you talked about who you work for, but you really didn't allude to the fact that you work for the people. I found that kind of a little disturbing, as a matter of fact.
You must have misunderstood my answer, because I said I did.
Well, that's not really how it came out, but that's neither here nor there. In traveling the state and interacting with people, if I pick and choose who I'm interacting with, then I'm going to get the answer I'm looking for. If I exclude certain people from my polling, my personal conversations, then I'm only going to get the responses that I'm looking for and that are going to feed into wherever I want to go to. But we have a very, very vast array of ideas, thoughts, suggestions, much based on ethnicity, personal backgrounds, upbringing, that if we don't bring all of those ideas into the storehouse, into our wheelhouse, we're really not going to come up with ideas and thoughts that are representative of the people. And I think when we get into this party issue, especially, and I'm not going to say it, well, I guess I am going to say it, especially with the Republican Party. I'm going to say it.
As long as you do it respectfully.
Yeah, I even tried to step away from it, but I had to come back to it. You know, but with the way that the partisan voting consistently has been there consistently. When we look at things like Planned Parenthood, voting against the best interests of our women. When we look at this is Pastor Dixon talking. Looking at the fact that in 2016, that $15 an hour is just barely enough for a person to live decently off of. Voting against the best interests of our seniors, voting against the best interests of our veterans, voting against all of the things that are going to make our nation better. I don't know who you're talking to, but the people that I talk to, because I come from a social justice advocacy background, and it only started since I came out of the prison system, okay? Been there too. So I understand what it takes in order to have comprehensive prison reform, because I've been there. You want to really know how to fix prisons? Let's do it the same way that we do when we go into the doctor. You walk into the doctor's office as a person, the doctor says, "What's wrong with you?" We tell him. We need to ask those who've been in the prison system how we fix prisons, not go for some super intellectual standpoint. But all of these different things, these experiences, these learned experiences, having my boots on the ground, as they say, for years, coming up in the projects of Chicago, interacting with those that are violent, actually, drug dealers, drug users. I've been shot at. Yeah, I understand how close that you can be to getting killed in the streets. When we sit as representatives of the people, then we need to understand that we represent all of the people, and we need to do what we can in order to hear from all of the people. I admire you for working at Mo's Day. But Mo's Day ain't getting to know the people. And it's kind of obvious when it comes to the voting records that getting to know the people needs to be a bigger priority than just Mo's one day or whatever. And I understand that you get to the schools too. Yes, that's well and good. But let me put it like I put it out there in the streets many times. Until you get to know Ray Ray and Pookie and them, you really don't know what's going on in the
True story.
system.
Very true.
Go ahead.
Well, Ray Ray's my cousin. So let me just say this.
I know it.
I don't know.
I know it.
I'm not. Listen. I'm happy. I'm happy to have this conversation, because the fact of the matter is that to assume that myself or Trey aren't talking to all the people is the politically correct word is hogwash. So here's the fact. If you're looking for a classic example of a criminal justice system heading in the right direction, stay home. Look around South Carolina. We've closed 6 prisons. We are supposed to have 30,000 folks incarcerated. We've got 20,000 incarcerated. Because in 2010, legislation passed for criminal justice reform. But according to our good friend Roland Martin on TV One, the states that are leading on criminal justice reform are Southern Republican states. I had to write down what you said because you said a lot of things in there. Being in touch with your constituents, one of the reasons why I visited 2 state prisons and sat there and fed them so that I could understand and appreciate what people are going through right now. What are the needs right now? How do we deal with folks right now? One of the reasons why Trey and myself are going around South Carolina, meeting with, in our current demographic makeup of our police and community relations, I think it's 3/4 black, quarter white, and probably half the cops are black and from around the state, is because Trey Gowdy believes that the issue of diffusing the issue that is building tension in communities is so important. Not only is it important in Greenville and Spartanburg in his congressional district, but as a United States Congress member, he believes it's important enough to go around the entire state and to meet around the country, if necessary, to solve these issues, because we don't just represent a certain party or a certain race. We represent everybody. The reason why I went on the bus, the reason why I worked at Moe's, the reason why I visited the state prisons, the reason why when I sat down and had a conversation about how to make folks safer, make sure our law enforcement officers, God bless their souls for what they do, for what they make, a calling and a passion. The reason why we sat down with these folks, the reason why we sat down with the NAACP's Legal Defense Fund, the ACLU, not because they vote for me, not because they support me, but because it's the right thing to do. If you're going to be a public servant, you do the right thing, not for your factions, but for the next generation of Americans.
Very well said, Senator. Very well said. I guess that's why with the NAACP they gave you an overall vote of F.
Hey, I'm happy. Hey, listen,
But
here's my point, though.
let me get back to it. Let me get back to what I was going to say.
We're going to have a civil
Having visited,
conversation. We better have one, because the reality of it is that
having visited,
I'm okay with the NAACP not appreciating my voting record. I'm going to meet with them anyways. It's not that you have to vote my way. I don't mind folks who say you're dead wrong. I'm going to meet with you anyways. That's the point of not succumbing to your faction, is to be interested and engaged with people who are not like you, who are philosophically completely opposed to your position. You still sit down and have a conversation, even when they give you an F, or as the NAACP has referred to me as before, as a ventriloquist dummy. I'm going to meet with them anyways. You know why? Because I'm not interested in the NAACP. I'm interested in the people they supposedly represent.
I'm really sorry that the statement took us over the civility area and I just got over talked. But let me get back to where I started. I appreciate that. Thank you so very much. You visited the prisons, okay? But while you were visiting the prisons, did you figure out that and initiate legislation in the Senate that's going to ban the box, that's inhibiting ex-felons from coming out and getting work? Did you start anything? Did you get anything there that that says that over time, here's how we're going to eliminate the thought that of the debt being paid, but it never is paid, where people who went to prison in 1965 still can't get a job? Did you learn about, while you were in there, how nobody that goes to prison really wants to come back? Because I was in there over 3 years and I never ran into anybody that wanted to come back. But those that got out, though, because of this revolving door, because of the lack of opportunities when they get out as an ex-felon, are not there to support them and to stay out, and ultimately are making our communities unsafe because we're not really rehabilitating people. Did you get that while you was there?
Yes, sir.
While you was at Moe's, while you was at Moe's, did you talk with that young mother that might have been working at Moe's and McDonald's and Taco Bell for minimum wage, who the reality is that they're working those 3 jobs because it just provides enough to put a roof over their head and food on their tables, and some people like to point fingers at them when those mothers don't show up at PTA meeting when all they're trying to do is survive. $7.25 an hour. Did you get all of that out of it? And if you did, then why haven't you done your job?
Okay, I'm glad you asked that question.
Let me interrupt just a minute.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to give you a chance to
That'd be
respond
wonderful.
briefly,
Yes.
and then I'm going to give you two one final word because we are just about out of time.
Oh gosh, this has got good.
It goes
Let's
fast.
just
I know.
talk this through.
We need to do
Let's
this
talk
again.
through. Absolutely. Here are the facts of what I discovered in my visits with the prison folks. Some really good people there who made a tragic mistake, and their lives were altered forever. We should never look down on other people, because but for the grace of God, there you might be. The average person incarcerated today has three things in common. They're functionally illiterate. They come from single-parent households, and they're mired in poverty, looking for ways out. So, I sat down with amazing folks. I believe it is the Kansas State, I might be wrong on the state. Kansas State Prison has opened the door for a company to come in and start training these prisoners on how to be productive and have a profitable life when they leave. They actually have started hiring the people. So yes, sir, I have now a classic example of what to do. As Trey said, 90% of these folks are incarcerated on the state level and not on the federal level. These programs allow these young men, mostly men, to make at least the minimum wage, maybe sometimes a little bit more, not much though, still $8 an hour. And when they leave prison, they leave with as much as $10,000. The best example is $40,000 in their savings account. They've been able to pay restitution. They've been able to catch up on back child support, and they get employed. 14 of these folks, since this program started 3 years ago, are now employed.
14.
So, yeah, 14. There's only been 56 through this one program. It just started 3 years ago. And they're not getting out as often as some would like. Second thing, while I was at Moe's, absolutely. Here's what we know about the minimum wage and the conversation around it. We know that when you go from $7.25 an hour to $15 an hour, this is a good example of caring about the issue as Reverend Dixon does, as I do, having been raised by a single mother who worked 16 hours a day. So I get this, not just from Pookie, but from Timmy. Mm-hmm. So the reality of it is this, that the average person stuck at a minimum wage job, about 17 to 21% of those folks will lose their jobs, because today, $2 trillion of payroll can be automated. Said differently, when you raise the minimum wage artificially with no production, what you end up with are more Olive Gardens with an iPad, more Subways with a touch screen. You eliminate the first rung of the economic ladder. And what does that mean? It manifests this way. It manifests that the average person that we're talking about has an unemployment rate of around 15%. And the guy or the gal that finishes their education while they're in prison and gets back in the workforce, you find that person making significantly more, and the unemployment rate falls through the floor. Consistent with reality are these facts. And so what have I done? I've created the Opportunity Agenda, and I've been working on it for years. The Opportunity Agenda focuses on the most important foundation that the federal government can help build. Because the two things, the chasms between the haves and have-nots, education and parent formation, family formation. The foundation is education. And then there are work skills, in prison or not. Then there are apprenticeship programs, co-sponsored by Cory Booker. Then there's an innovation, the Investing in Opportunities Act, which targets distressed communities. The answer is, I've got a lot of legislation. It hasn't moved. I haven't, and we're working on it. And hopefully, with a more receptive culture, we'll see some of this legislation become law.
Congressman Gowdy and then Mr. Today, I'll give you the last word. Briefly. We're officially out of time.
It's going to be tough for two lawyers, but
I have great confidence in you.
While you were talking, and he'll get upset with me for bringing this up, but I have listened to him be called an Uncle Tom. I have listened to him having his blackness challenged because he happens to have a different political orthodoxy. Not by you, but by others. I'm not talking about by
You're
you.
gonna say, where you going with this?
I'm not talking about you. This is where I'm
Look,
going. I'll tell you where I'm going.
I never
I'll
said
tell you where
that.
I'm going. I started the night by complimenting someone who has never voted for me and never will vote for me. I'm going to compliment another man in the back, Eric Graven, former head of the Greenville County Democrat Party, somebody that I not only respect but like. He's not going to vote for me. He shouldn't vote for me. We don't agree on the issues. But you can have civility in the way you discuss things. And you can look for those areas where you want to be united. I listened to y'all discuss education. I didn't hear that much difference. You both think it's the closest thing to magic that we have in our culture and the single best way to transform a life. So I would just say this. When you were talking, I thought to myself, Paul held the coat while they stoned Stephen to death. Moses was guilty of manslaughter, and David was guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. And they all three went on to do great things. People can change their lives. Our God is a God of second chances. I'll commit myself to spend more time understanding the needs of those who are reintegrating in society. And the only thing I would ask of you is that you spend time talking to crime victims who have had their lives totally unraveled by the acts of some of the people that you referenced in prison. I'll do it if you'll do it.
Apparently the congressman doesn't know me. Because anybody in here that knows me knows I've dedicated my life to exactly what you're saying. So I haven't seen you in any of those circles yet. So, but it's okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, but you misjudged me. Yeah.
I'm not judging. That's my point. I'm not judging you. That's my point.
That's a
But
legitimate
help me
term. You
keep people from
misjudged me.
judging him too, simply because he has a different political orthodoxy. You ought to be the first one condemning people who call him names.
How do you know that I don't? How do you know that I don't? What proof? Excuse me. Let me just say this, and then I know we're wrapping it up, and I know
let's
Chris
wrap
still
it
has it. But what really that if that isn't judgmental for you to just say that, you just told me what I tell people about Senator Scott, and what you just told me.
I think one of your
Totally
press releases
untrue.
that said that Tim Scott just discovered he was black might be the reason why he's referring to that. I mean, let's be
All right.
Let's be transparent
Let
on
me
the
go.
stage.
Let
Let's
me
be
go back
honest
to
with
that
the
then.
situation here.
Let me go back to that then.
Please do. I'm looking forward to this one.
The statement was made in the aftermath of your 3-day speeches, 3 days of speeches on the Senate floor, that basically tied you into the African American community in a way that you'd never been tied in before. Now, sarcastically speaking, I said, yeah, Senator Scott discovered he's black. And I'm glad that this filtered back to you.
Well, it was just because you put it in a press release.
But it's not. I didn't call you an Uncle Tom.
Just discovered I'm black. I mean,
say that you just.
I've been black for a long time. Can you tell? I mean, here's the deal.
It's quite obvious that blackness isn't always just the color of skin.
Let me just tell you, in 1997, when I was stopped 7 times, in 1998, as a member of county council, when I held a meeting at county council 18 years ago, driving while black, that might have been an indication that I was concerned with the issue. In 2011, when there was articles done on my stop, that might have been an indication that it wasn't 2015, it wasn't 2016, it wasn't an election year.
But unfortunately,
the facts are simply this.
Really
I thought you were going to interrupt me.
Okay,
I thought this is civility.
I'm going to
I
interrupt
apologize.
both
Let
of
me
you
stop.
for a moment.
Unfortunately, you've done nothing to stem over-aggressive policing.
Okay.
Nothing.
Because I think law enforcement officers do their jobs 99% of the time.
Your
And so,
participation grades are going down. Okay.
I thought we were just getting started.
I know. I
thought we had a
appreciate
couple
the
more hours.
enthusiasm,
This is
and I
good.
hope that this is not the last conversation that everyone in here has. But I have made a promise to get certain people out of here at an hour, and we are well past
I
it.
thought you
so
said 11.
I did not. I
Sorry.
did not.
Sorry.
So I want to give Mr. Fideli one last word, and if you derail this, and I will warn you. So,
Wrap
The
it up,
pressure is
Trey.
on, Mr. Fideli. You
Yeah.
have to wrap this up in a way that will send them out
And-
to go have more discussions.
And I would be happy to, because there seems to be one point of agreement amongst all of us, and that's that education is the platform to opportunity in this country.
Yep.
Because education is at the top of my platform, because it's something that I care so deeply about. I've gone around and I've been meeting with school superintendents in this district. And one moment really impacted me from those meetings. And I was meeting with a superintendent of a rural school district in Spartanburg County. And he told me, he said, Chris, if you get elected, just please promise me that you will not cut money for free and reduced school lunches. Because over 60% of my kids depend on those to survive. When they go home, they don't have anywhere to go. They can't walk to the corner store. They don't have money to get a ride or go anywhere. They need these lunches in order to survive. Because if they're hungry, they're not learning. And if they're not learning, they're not going to get ahead. They don't have that platform. If we don't actually work on these issues that really have an impact on people's lives, then we're going to continue to see the same results. Don't be surprised that kids from poorer areas don't do as well as school if they're not eating. We need to get back to ask ourselves who we are as a country. Are we a country that allows our children to live in such great poverty that they can't use the time they spend in school in order to learn? And as long as we have congressmen that vote to cut money for school lunches, that vote to cut money for Pell Grants so that low-income kids can have a chance to go to college, if we have congressmen who vote against flood relief funding for our state when we're hit with the 1,000-year flood, if we have congressmen who vote against the Violence Against Women Act, then we have ourselves a very broken system of representation.
All right.
Congress?
Professor?
I'm going to give you,
Professor?
because he mentioned congressman, I'm going to give you one
he
last
did.
word, but
I
you
would,
need to keep it very quick.
Chris,
and
I'll
that's
invite
it.
you to go watch the floor speech, both of them
I did, in
that
fact.
I gave on the violence against
I
women.
did.
I will never be lectured to you about my commitment to violence against women. My chief of staff was the head of my violence against women task force. I'm the first person in South Carolina who started one. So I will not be I voted for both the House versions. But because of politics being what it is, the Democrats had to put something in there that the Republicans in the House could not take. So if you want an indictment of something, it's on politics. Do not ever question my commitment to protecting women in this country.
At the end of the day, it comes down to actions speak louder than words.
You can sit down a minute. I'm not quite done. I want one last word with everyone here. I promised them an evaluation. I hope that you recognize that we were actually able this evening to have substantive discussion. It is clear they don't all agree with each other on a lot of things, but I think it was also clear that there are some areas of common ground that could be discussed. We don't do it if we have parties walling themselves off. I commend these candidates for being willing to show up this evening and have a conversation with each other, even when parts of it were a little uncomfortable for them. I thank you folks for your participation and for keeping it civil. I was curious as to whether I was going to have to call anybody down. You applauded appropriately and then shut up. You laughed when appropriate. You made faces at them, and I am happy to say I have spent the entire evening and have not had to glare at anyone. So your participation grades all around are quite good. Thank you all, and thank these candidates again.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate you.